So I wanted to talk about one of the largest drone attacks in the history of the war across Russia, just hitting different locations. But the main location that it seemed to be aiming at was a port along the coastline here, about 450 kilometers away from Ukrainian positions in the south. So these drones were launched way over here, 80 of them, to hammer this port. And well, let's just say they were doing pretty good work, because you can see they made impact. Now, what's interesting about this drone attack, at least to me, what's interesting about this drone attack is that, I don't know if there's this one video that was just perplexing to me. I wonder if I can find it. No, it's not here. Where is it? I think it is in this geo-confirmed Ukraine segment. I think it's one of these ones below. But there's this one video from this attack, and I could point out every single oil refinery that got blown up or different things like that. I don't think that's really super necessary right now. But it was just drone after drone after drone not getting intercepted. And it makes me wonder just how strained the Russian air defense system is if drones can travel like this freely across Russia, just for kilometers and kilometers inside Russian territory. Look at this. They don't end. There's been over 80 of them. All of this scum flying towards the port, the coast, the terminals. The guy on camera is Russian. Fucking exploding, and air defenses are working. They're flying in a row. Bastards. It's a mess. Moron. And there's another one. 3 in a row. They just keep coming. The swarms flying.
20
in 15 minutes. This is crazy. The air defense, it's not working at all. This bullshit's been going on since 2 a.m. It's 2:30 a.m.
Это с 2 часов ночи такая херня. С 2:30 где-то началось.
Бля, это пиздец.
Fuck, it's pretty crazy. You hear that? Oh shit, it hit the overpass.
Бля, на эстакаду прилетело. На эстакаду прилетело. Все, нет эстакады.
We don't have the overpass anymore. And no tanks. We fucking waited.
Дождались бы. Охуеть.
Fucking hell. Point is, one of the largest drone attacks of the war, and during this drone attack, it seemed like the Russians were having trouble intercepting the incoming projectiles. Not that they announced it that way, but that's certainly what the video evidence suggests. But that's not the only attack I wanted to talk to you guys about, even though it was a bigger one. They made impact. They hit a lot of oil refineries. I also wanted to revisit the Belbek air base that was attacked in southern Crimea. If you want to know where it was, here it is in southern Crimea. Now, before, it was harder to hit these locations in southern Crimea. It was harder to hit them because in Crimea, the Russians have concentrated a lot of air defense equipment, and the Ukrainians have been concentrating on taking that air defense equipment out. But it does mean that there is a higher likelihood of stuff getting intercepted because the Russians know that the Ukrainians have been targeted near nonstop. But with the ATACMS, before, the only things that could reach down this far were either the Sea Baby drones, which are these little boat drones that they fill with explosives, or, as of recent, anti-aircraft weapons, and they put out to the water to harass the Russian Black Sea Fleet, or these kind of long-launching bomb drones, the ones we were just looking at. But if you're trying to hit, like, air defense system in Crimea, those drones are much more likely going to get knocked out than, say, ATACMS. But Ukraine's been restricted from ATACMS until very recently. And so the Ukrainians decided that they would use these newly provided ATACMS, which have, I think, about like maybe 150 to 200 kilometers in range, putting them just in range of southern Crimea and basically all of Russian-occupied Ukraine. They decided they would use it to target this southern airbase, which the Russians have been launching air sorties from, bombing Ukraine. And they had some pretty good success, which we've already talked about on the channel. We've already showed a video of the bombing, but we'll show it again for people who haven't seen it. Oh, that's air defense working. Oh. Kind of hard to see from this distance, but that's the best you're going to get. But we do, well, it's not the best you're going to get. This was definitely the best video. This is the one where you could see the most burning, you could see the most destruction. But now we have better photos, much better photos. And so I wanted to show you some of the destruction that American missiles have done in southern occupied Crimea. Here is some example of some planes that were destroyed. As you can see on the right-hand side, these aircraft were destroyed. Now, it wasn't just aircraft that was destroyed. There was even an instance of a decoy, as you can see here, being destroyed. Now, how is it a decoy? Basically, the Russians painted the ground to look like a jet, so the Ukrainians may waste munitions hitting that, and maybe they hit the decoy instead of the plane. So the Ukrainians decided they would just hit both, which they did. They hit both, taking out helicopters, taking out MiG fighter jets, and even if you see here before what these fuel tankers and refueling pumps and equipment and stations next to it, that little building up to its north, that was absolutely annihilated. As you can see, the same fueling station. Here it is. Boom. There it is after. Now, the destruction of the fuel here, which I think was like 400,000 liters or something like that. I forget the exact proportions. While losing that's not good for the Russians, it isn't exactly disastrous. The thing that's more difficult for the Russian here is the loss of the pumping equipment, the refueling equipment, and the damage done to it, because that means that they're going to have to get experts down to this airbase to fix that equipment. They can't just say, bring in more fuel or just bring new fuel containers. They actually have to get more refueling equipment and get technical experts that can actually repair that. That takes time, effort, and means that this area, at least this refueling station, is going to be out of commission for a while. Who knows until they repair it. But yes, this is just some of the visual data that I wanted to show you guys of the destruction, so you guys just know it isn't just like Ukrainian state propaganda or anything. These attacks have had an impact, both the big drone attack and this attack. The Ukrainians have been engaging in a lot of drone attacks, a lot of missile attacks as of late. One, because they finally gotten the ATACMS, and so they're using them on training bases in Luhansk, which has done a lot of damage. They're using them in occupied Crimea. It obviously would have been more helpful if they could have used it in near Kharkiv to take out those troops that were gathering for the Kharkiv offensive, but American restrictions on those weapons still exist. And I wanted to tell you guys something. Actually, no, we'll revisit that topic later. Or actually, no, you know, we could revisit that topic now. We can visit that topic now, because I've already told you about the big drone attack, and I've already told you about the decoys being taken out. So we might as well have the conversation about what commitments the American government has made. So there was this statement recently from Anthony Blinken that was along the lines of, you know, we do not endorse the use of American weapons against Russia proper, but it's up to the Ukrainians ultimately to make those decisions. And so what that sounded like, and as we talked about it on the show, we said, and we speculated, it was speculation, we said, this could be the United States giving a wink and a nod, saying they're not directing the strikes, they're not necessarily telling the Ukrainians to do the strikes, but it's up to Ukraine what it does with those weapons. And it could have been, in my view, the American government repositioning its stance after seeing the Russians do a big offensive in the Kharkiv Oblast across the border, with the Ukrainian government reporting that they saw the troops gathering for the offensive, but they couldn't use some of their most effective weapons, like ATACMS, since they were provided by the United States, to strike them and take them out. Now, that's not the only reason that these villages on the border were taken. There's a bunch of reasons, but that's one of the reasons that the Ukrainian government has brought up. And so I thought maybe, after the success of the strike on the airbase in southern Crimea, after the success of a recent swarm of drone attacks, including that big drone attack with 80 drones, just drone after drone after drone, that the American government might be changing its position in light of recent events. That is not the case. The State Department went out of its way to make sure that that was not what was being assumed from Anthony Blinken's statement. Going out and correcting the record, this State Department official came out to say, no, Ukraine, even after the Kharkiv offensive and those targets not being utilized, not being targeted, not being gone after, when that could have helped defend Kharkiv, the American government is not changing its position. Let's listen to the State Department representative.
So we've heard a number of times from the U.S. officials that U.S. does not want Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia with American weapons. In the wake of Russian offensive and attacks on Kharkiv, does U.S.
I think he's wearing that on Vyshyvanka Day, which is the outfit he's wearing under, which is the Ukrainian outfit, the Vyshyvanka. So that might stand out in that room, but it's for Vyshyvanka Day, which is like a national Ukrainian holiday.
Kharkiv, does U.S. consider changing that approach? Because that's what Ukrainians are asking for. It's very difficult for them to respond to these attacks that come literally from across the border when Russians know that they can basically be saved there.
Yeah,
By the way, it's not just that the offensive forces are gathering. I've seen videos of Russian MLRS systems literally blocking traffic in the middle of the road near the border with Ukraine, just firing volley after volley after volley into the Kharkiv Oblast. And these weapons are probably out of the range, maybe out of the range of artillery, but maybe they're not out of range for ATACMS. Not saying you should use ATACMS on one MLRS system, just the point being, Russia can freely strike into Ukraine, but Ukraine cannot use American weapons to strike at the targets that are striking into Ukraine to defend itself because of this geopolitical restriction. Now, these types of geopolitical restrictions have always existed. For example, the American government during the Korean War would not strike Chinese bases in China. They were only allowed to strike Chinese air bases in North Korea under the pretext that but there was a standard that the Chinese would not bomb American forces or attack American forces or do anything against American forces from air bases directly in China because they know that that could attract America's ire. So the rule was for the Chinese Air Force and for different Chinese vehicles that they would have to kind of drop off briefly at a base in Korea before then moving on to engage American forces. This was because this geopolitical border, this line affecting military operations. So stuff like this does happen due to political intricacies, but in this instance, it's particularly frustrating. And if the American government was willing to test Russia's bravado and test their chest pounding on all the other issues when it came to escalation, how long until eventually they move on this, especially as the British are doing what they did with the Western tanks, doing what they did with their other times that they broke precedent, which is coming in, doing something that other Western countries won't do with the assumption that maybe other countries will follow them. Because they did that with Western tanks, and recently they said that British-provided Storm Shadow weapons can be used within Russian territory. But on the other hand, we have some suggestions that there might even be American diplomats pressuring the Ukrainian government not just not to use American-provided weapons in Russian territory, but even other Western weapons in Russian territory. Anyway, let's listen.
We haven't changed our position. We believe that the equipment, the capabilities that we are giving Ukraine, that other countries are giving to Ukraine, should be used to take back Ukrainian sovereign territory.
Is this a request to Ukrainians, or this is a binding condition that goes along with weapons?
We've made our requests pretty public on this. Again, I would reiterate that in every single Ukraine Defense Contact Group that the Secretary convenes, the weapons that are provided, again, it's for use on the battlefield. And the Secretary in his...
The battlefield also includes Russian territory, because they're making the Russian territory the battlefield, either from cross-border raids or from Russian bombardment or Russia invading from Russian territory.
Conversations with Minister Umerov, talks through how best those
Umerov is the Ukrainian defense minister.
Capabilities can be used, and we believe that is within Ukrainian territory.
That's not true. This is bull, to be clear. It's complete horse hockey. The idea that in every instance, the best way every ATACMS could be used is within Ukrainian territory. That's not true. There are Russian air bases in Russian territory that are being used to bomb Ukraine, that Ukraine could use these ATACMS against them. It's that it's not best for America's specific interests, not best for winning the war. It would help if they could target Russian bases in Russia. It could help if they could have targeted these troops that were gathering. If it was useful for them to use the ATACMS against 116 confirmed KIA Russian soldiers training in Luhansk, then why would it not be useful to use it against, say, 150 to 200 soldiers gathering for an offensive in the Kharkiv, right across the border from the Kharkiv Oblast? It just doesn't make any sense to me. If they want to make an argument from escalation, that's one thing, but don't make an argument from military effectiveness. That's not an argument they cannot make. Finland had a different position on this, by the way. I wanted to show you the Finnish president talking about the need for Ukraine to win the war, which I think also puts the previous State Department officials' statements in a better context.
What we see in terms of the momentum on the front line in the east of Ukraine, a new front line, it seems the Russians are opening up in the north, very close to the city of Kharkiv. What we see is that momentum right now appears to sit with the Russians. Zelensky and the Ukrainians are desperate for more long-range missiles, more air defenses, more of the weaponry that they say they could effectively neutralize the Russian threat if only they had been given them in timely fashion.
I agree. That's why Finland has been very front-heavy on this. We just came out with a package when I visited Zelensky early April with a security agreement and actually with air defenses and heavy ammunition. And everyone needs to do this. We need to continue to do this. The
But
US...
you must listen to the Americans, for example, when they say to the Ukrainians, you must not hit Russia's oil infrastructure. It is an escalatory act which is not in your, and indeed the wider world's interest.
By the way, when they talk about not the wider world's interest, it depends on what, if they're targeting oil export terminals, that's one thing, because that could affect international oil prices. But targeting Russian refineries just means that the Russians will not be able to make refined natural gas products, oil products from the crude, which means there's less profit for them, but they can still export the crude through barrels and like through whatever pipe infrastructure they do have with Asia. Not much, but whatever they do have. They could still try to put it through Turkey and make it mixed products so they can export it to Europe through a middleman, because the Turks have helped them facilitate, I think like $3 billion worth of Russian energy transfer to Europe through Greece. And the Turks working with the Greeks to get Russian energy to Europe. Who would have thunk it? But it's happening. So I don't really buy the idea that Ukraine targeting Russian refineries is going to undermine the international oil or crude markets. I do think that if they ended up blowing up the oil export terminals, either on the Baltic Sea or on the Black Sea, then we're talking about, or maybe if even further deep down east, then we're talking about something that could affect international oil markets. And it does show that the Ukrainians are showing restraint, because something like that could affect international oil prices instantaneously.
Do you think that is a fundamental mistake, that kind of message?
My main worry right now is not the price of oil. My main worry is that Ukraine must win this war. And in that sense, I think Ukraine has fairly free hands at what it can do. Remember, it is facing a huge aggressor, which is violating all rules of war and all international law. And it must win no matter what.
No matter what, from the Finnish president. I wonder if there's anything from Finnish history that would make them more sympathetic. I think the historians at home can tell me that.